What is up, my YouTube family? It is your boy Curtis Wayne for episode number 1 of Decoded. So just to kind of explain what Decoded is to you guys, Decoded is going to be me giving you guys 2 videos a month of going into detail on subjects that I've learned. You know, these subjects can come from me watching certain individuals on YouTube. It'll come from my schooling education that I'm currently gaining with Full Sail University. Is going to be taught to you my way. I'm going to start out with the basics, and I'm going to give you guys all the tips to make your music sound the best that it possibly can. I mean, as far as mixing music, you know, that's all going to come down to your ear and your talent. But what I want to do is just give you guys the codes. This episode we will be starting out talking about bitrate. It's super important, and it's something that actually opened my eyes up to the different bit rates when it comes to bouncing down your files for MP3. You know, something that you may put on your Instagram page, or you may be sending a track to an artist. And it's certain things that we should know so we can make sure we give people the best files possible. So, like I said, this is episode 1, and we're talking about bitrate today, okay? So, let's get into it. All right, family. So, like I said, this is episode 1, and today we are talking about bitrate. As you guys can see here, I have Logic Pro pulled up because this is my DAW of choice. This is also the DAW that I'm learning on while attending school. So I will be doing a lot of explaining from Logic. And you may see some videos with Pro Tools as well. And other DAWs, I utilize Reason Studio. I also have Studio One. But the main focus will be Logic Pro. So to get started on this topic and this subject of bitrate, so there's different bitrate modes, and those different modes actually depend on what your music will sound like, right? Or whatever the file is that you're bouncing down, it's going to dictate what it sounds like. So for instance, if you look up here at bitrate, it says bitrate mono. We have all of these different bit rates, going all the way up to 32 bits or 32 kilobits per second. KBS. KBPS stands for kilobits per second. So we go all the way from 32 kilobits per second all the way up to 320 kilobits per second. Some DAWs may be different. Some may vary. Some may start as low as 16-bit and go all the way up to 320 bits. So here that's in mono, and then we also have in stereo here in Logic, which once again starts at 32 kilobits per second and go all the way up to 320 kilobits per second. So when we're bouncing down our files in these specific modes, bitrate modes, you have constant bitrate, which is abbreviated as CBR, constant bitrate. So constant bitrate, it maintains the steady bitrate regardless of the complexity of the program or complexity of the file that you're bouncing down. So basically what that means is it's just going to give you a constant bitrate. There's not going to be any deviation within the complexity of that actual program or that file that you're bouncing down. Then we also have your average bitrate mode, which is abbreviated as ABR, and that it varies the bitrate around to a specified target rate. So the average bitrate is basically going to kind of go with what's going on in that specific file or program. It varies. So it just basically bounces around to whatever bit rate is happening in that specific that specific piece of music. It may be different bit rates going on in that piece of music, and that's what the average bit rate mode will do. It will follow the bit rate. And then you have variable bit rate mode, which is abbreviated VBR, and that maintains a constant quality, and it also raises the lower bit rates. So if we go back to the average bit rate mode, where I said it follows the bit rates within that specific file or program, the variable bit rate will actually raise those lower bit rates and keep it all at a constant level. And it's said that the variable bit rate is to be the best bit rate choice when you're bouncing down an MP3 file. And like I said, in different DAWs, just depending on what DAW you're using, it could be different. Like this is Logic. So you know, if you're using Cubase, it may not have, it's going to look different from this here, your bounce options, but for the most part, most DAWs will have MP3 or a wave for sure. But when it comes to an MP3 file, you should be able to choose your bit rate mode, your kilobits per second, and it should have an option for you to choose the specific mode that you'd want to have on there. And nowadays, it's just most DAWs are pretty much just set, and especially if you choose a higher bit rate. So for instance, if you're choosing the 320 kilobits per second, those three options are really obsolete. But if you go any lower, like let's say someone wanted you to send them a file at 256 kilobits per second, you may have an option to change. See, like here on Logic, it tells you here, it gives you the option here. It says use variable bitrate encoding, VBR. So you would want to go ahead and select that if you're sending a file at 256 kilobits per second. But at 320 kilobits per second, that option is there to choose here in Logic. But like I said, some DAWs may not give you the option to choose that. But if you're using 320 kilobits per second, it really doesn't matter, because you're going to get the best file out of that MP3 at 320 kilobits per second. So when it comes to choosing your files, of course, most places, especially if you're sending music out professionally, you're selling your beats, and you want to, the artist may ask you if that artist is taking his music or her music serious, and they say, well, you know what, my engineer told me if you could send me a file at 256 kilobits per second, you would know, okay, I'm going to send them an MP3 at 256 kilobits per second, but let me make sure I choose that VBR, variable bit rate mode, so that they can have the best sounding file. And basically, it's just going to kind of help your music sound as best as it possibly can. When it comes to MP3 files and kilobits, you're going to lose some quality in the music, right? Some of the dynamics are going to go away. So you always want to make sure you choose the best rate kilobit. You want to choose the highest kilobits, and you also want to make sure you choose the best rate mode as possible, so that way your files sound as good as possible. I don't know if you ever noticed, but if let's say for instance you mix a song in your studio and you bounce it down to 320 kbps, kilobits per second, and you listen to it on your cell phone, or let's say you're listening to it in your studio, it sounds good coming through your monitors, everything sounds A1. Then you go ahead and share that file to your cell phone. You notice the quality kind of drops a little more, because now there's more added compression on top of that file that you've already added compression to when you bounced it down as an MP3 file, because that's usually what happens, is being compressed. It's lossy audio is what it's called. Lossy, Lossy. So it's just basically being compressed, and then once you send it to another platform, it's being compressed again and again and again. So you will notice that the quality will sound different, and that's why. So for instance, if, like I said, if you have a good sounding song, it sounds good in your studio, you take it to your car, you listen to it, man, this sounds good, and then you bounce it down, and then you upload it to Instagram, and you're like, man, why does it sound, I lost a whole lot of quality, man. This mix doesn't sound as complete as it did in my studio. And that's why, because you're losing some of the quality, and sometimes it's, it can be audible, but sometimes you can't really tell. So that's why getting a good mix is imperative as well. Making sure you keep your levels, make sure you gain stage properly. All right. So like I said, this is episode number 1. We're starting with bitrate, and we're just going to go through different things that I feel will be pertinent for you to get out here and utilize it for your success. Because like I said, these things, I've been, making music and been around music for many years, man. And I never really paid attention to those things. I'm just like, okay, let me do an MP3 file. Fine, let's just do MP3, 320 kilobits per second. Or you may not even understand what the KBPS stands for. It stands for kilobits per second. You're just like, okay, let me do MP3, 320, whatever this KBPS stands for. Let me just select that, but I want to come and let you guys know what these terms, these abbreviations stand for, what they mean, so that way you can have a better understanding. All right. So with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next episode of Decoded.